long as I don't have to deal with Discord noises popping up in the recording, I'll be happy with this.
Okay.
Hello, good people, and welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we celebrate the retreat of the accursed sun by playing role-playing video games and go down to the depths. I think that's what we do. Hello, I am the half-elf fighter mage of this adventuring party, Brayden Arbitrary Water Redacted. Joining me is, as always, a half-elf mage thief multi-class, Chris Zombie Pie Redacted.
I've got this really cool spell, but I used it 2 minutes ago, so now I need to take a nap before I can use it again.
Just use your backstab and move silently skills. But also joining us, here to rescue our party from uncertain doom in the depths of Undermountain, it is the halfling fighter thief, Cassidy, from the Bad Game Hall of Fame. Welcome back, Cassidy.
Thanks for having me back. Welcome. Thank you for remembering the character I picked out, too. My little halfling fighter thief Peacemaker. I was one who didn't go with magic, I guess. I was the one who didn't go with the magic run. I didn't get the memo on that. I didn't.
No. I live in... I was bullied by a member of my chat into not picking the dwarf fighter cleric because, and I quote, "You picking the dwarf fighter cleric is like anyone else picking the human fighter."
You've become too predictable to your audience.
Congratulations. I like a character who hits things and can heal themselves.
You've also been using the same name over and over again. Why don't you remind everyone?
Sometimes I name my character Von Hildebrand or Groncho or Ted Stabber. RPG character naming is...
I believe you also have a Lord of the Rings reference name.
Oh, yeah, Fordo Boggins.
That's good. That's really good.
It doesn't infringe any copyright either. If you misarrange the letters, then I hear the Tolkien estate can sue you.
Fordo Boggins, and his uncle Balbo Boggins.
Bravest little hobbits of them all, I hear.
Yeah.
So, Descent to Undermountain, huh?
So, yeah. This is...
my fault, I think.
No, it's my fault. I got you to replay this.
Yeah.
It's the accursed sun's fault. It is the Kusolstice once again, and with the retreat of the sun comes our retreat into darkness. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deeplistens. $1 will get you the Discord, where you can interact with me and other people, I assume. We are still doing the anime podcast idea. That will probably be recorded within the next couple weeks. If you want to follow along with your friends at home at Off the Deep End about beloved anime adaptions of popular visual novels.
You sound so enthused about it. You sound so...
Cass, we're watching Dean Stay Night for our pilot episode.
Which, Cass,
I don't know shit about anime.
If you don't know anything about anime, you probably know one of the most famous memes to come from this. This is the anime that gave us people die when they are killed.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, I'm on the same page now.
So we got to find out, is the meme actually replacing a good show? Who's to say? We'll say.
I had to pay money to High Dive because it's not on Crunchyroll.
You sure did spend a grand total, what was it,
$6?
$6? Yeah. I was willing to find it out there.
The things we do for content.
Yeah, so we're still figuring out if we want to put that behind a patron goal or a money goal, but that's what we're doing, and I'll once again reiterate that if we get to 40 patrons before, let's say, mid-July, I'll platinum our last game, Time and Eternity. I'm not too good for it.
Is that the anime third-person shooter one, Behind the Back?
Yeah,
yes,
it is. We just played that, Cass.
That game seems cool.
Sure.
Cass, I think you would get a lot.
You would get a lot out of it.
I think it is perhaps Bad Game Hall of Fame worthy, even if it has a Yuzo Koshiro score, so it can't be completely bad.
It's definitely in that category of it was not a good video game, and it's got a level of anime horseshitness that I don't think any of us quite enjoyed, but it reminds me of the last time we had Cass where we were talking about games that reputationally are called the worst, but they actually aren't maybe the worst.
Yeah, it is the lowest rated RPG on the PS3.
That seems a little unfair.
And it is not that. It's not a Neptunia.
I do recall the last time I was on here. Funny you should mention that we were here to discuss Hoshiwo Minarihito for the Famicom, and I believe I came in defense of that game. I believe I was the voice that was standing up for the rights of Famicom RPGs, JRPGs from the mid to late 80s. And yes. I believe I offhandedly mentioned during that recording session something about Descent to Undermountain.
Yes, and that was probably the genesis of this.
The impetus for all this now.
Yes, because I was reading through the blog at the Bad Game Hall of Fame and saw that you had streamed Descent to Undermountain, I believe.
I think I streamed a few minutes of it. We did a Dire Dungeons and Dragons stream where we did a whole amuse-bouche of bad Dungeons and Dragons games.
There are a lot of them. We've played 2 of them for this podcast. That Ubisoft published Pools of Radiance sequel,
which will blow up your computer if you're not careful.
Yeah, is very dull.
If it weren't for the fact that it would delete your system files off of your computer if you don't know what you're doing. That game
you like to live life on the edge.
That game is genuinely unremarkable. Other than it came from a studio that was forced to switch from AD&D to pseudo 3.5.
Yeah,
or third edition. 3.5 wasn't out.
Yeah, it was just 3.0.
But yeah, other than that, not really dubious.
It's pretty bad, but it's incredibly dull.
More
than it
is. This game,
awful.
However,
so before we get into this game, I feel like the background of how did this game...
Oh, wait. Also, plugs. Let's do the show.
I did the plugs.
I thought we wanted to give Cass, proper introduction.
Oh, I mean, Cass, yeah, you should introduce yourself again. Fuck it.
Yeah, sure, why not? I am Cassidy, they of the Bad Game Hall of Fame. We used to write about games. I don't do that so much anymore. Now I stream video games out. You can watch those at twitch.tv/Bad Game Hall of Fame. And in preparation for this particular podcast, we did stream all of Descent to Undermountain. Yes. It took us 5 weeks, 3-hour play sessions once a week. So for a total of 15 hours. And I played the version 1.0 release. I don't know what version of the game both of you played.
The version I acquired on the internet and gave to Chris was the 1.3.
So we'll definitely have some notes to compare.
Yes. I know you have notes about this, and it fascinates me.
But before that, let me also quickly say that we stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see us play bad games like Descent to Undermountain and Hoshiwo Mirahito, and maybe, I don't know, I have an inkling to play maybe Raven's Cry one of these days.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that into the ether. I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to vision that, project that image.
You and Sharky played... fucking Yaiba recently, right?
Yeah, Ninja Gaiden Z.
God.
Braden's tried to play that multiple times.
That's going to get played by me in the near future all the way through. And
good luck.
I find it unpleasant.
You don't say.
Yeah. Ninja Gaiden 3, I think, is a disaster, but Yaiba seems like a trash fire.
That would be a word to describe it. I pawned that shit off on Charky. That's the great thing about having a co-host, is that there's a game you want to cover but you don't really necessarily want to play. You can just be like, Peon, it's you. It falls on you to play that.
Yes.
It's wench, servant. Please play this game for me, and I'll sit here and I'll chuckle
hey, ZP,
in the background.
how about you stream Anachronox? Anachronox isn't bad,
No,
though.
it's just weird.
It's slow.
If you wanted me to join
weird.
this whole, like, if you two are doing Yaiba, I guess I can do Ninja Blade.
Ooh, that's a good one. FromSoft's classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. FromSoft put out 2 games in 2009, and one of them redefined video games, and the other one was Ninja Blade.
And then 3 years later, they did Steel Battalion Heavy Armor, and they redefined the genre again.
Jesus. I'm so glad I don't have a Kinect.
I have one. I can do that for you if you need me to.
Oh.
Looks like someone drew the short straw. It's
All right. Listen up. Charity stream idea. No. Yeah, so before we descend to Intermountain, I feel like Undermountain to Intermountain.
Interplays Undermountain.
We should talk about Interplay.
Yeah.
The home of Intermountain.
One of, for a bit, like, a stalwart to computer video games.
Yes.
Authored some of the most important games in certain genres for a while. There was a period of time in my life when if you pushed me and cornered me and asked me to name my favorite CRPG, I'd probably say Planescape. Or maybe Baldur's Gate 2.
They made that their Wasteland in the 80s, and
Fallout, and
then went on to make The Fallout and all of the stuff that Black Isle made.
The original Wasteland.
Icewind
beloved
Dale.
classic
Icewind
game.
Dale.
Lionheart, Legacy of the Crusader.
Pretty, like,
They
very...
were a Bard's Tale, right?
Yeah.
Initially?
Yes. I think that might have still been under a different company.
But it's...
But yes, The Bard's Tale was Brian Fargo's first
thing.
big reach into that pile. And, of course, there was the Bard's Tale construction set, which I believe is around the same time as Forgotten Realms Unlimited Adventures. Sort of competed with each other for genuinely impressive for the time offline attempts to, create and share your own D&D levels. But Interplay also published games that were not beloved RPGs, like Descent.
Descent is important, though, and it was still beloved. It was just not an RPG.
Descent was fucking huge.
Descent was big.
A 6 degrees of freedom shooter, as I believe the coin was termed in relation to that game.
And the first-person shooter, even though you were kind of in a spaceship sort of thing, that was fully 3D. Like, the ship you were in, the particles you were shooting, and the worlds that you were moving around in were in 3D. And yes, it was of an era, like 95, but people forget. But that first version of Descent was doing fully 3D environments and 3D movement on MS-DOS.
Yes.
And, like, Risk OS for the Acorn computer. Like, some pretty incredible accomplishments from a technical side of things at a time when no one was fully taking that bite Like, you could say even like those early flight simulator games, they were not doing fully 3D. In fact, they were still doing certain 3D reworkery on that. And they realized while making Descent, like after working on, I think it was Mike Kulas and Matt Toshlog, who were people who had worked on Ultima Underworld, which is a game that we will probably have to talk about. They realized that they could probably add textures to these things that people were kind of like, I don't know if we can put this in a video game, but they were called polygons. And that if you can add textures to the polygons, you could make them three-dimensional. And so, like, the first early sketches of Descent were actually in 1993. And then they released it, and it was almost immediately a huge hit, because most people were like, oh my god, it's all in 3D. But, like, Descent was almost immediately a massive success story. Like, it
Yes, Descent 1 and 2 sold very well.
And this is going to lead to something of a bit of an unfortunate trend with Interplay, which is they had a hit, and then they spent the money from that hit poorly, because a lot of the money that they made off of Descent, Descent 2, Free Space, Baldur's Gate 2, they spent it on projects that just weren't doing it. Like, the Stonekeep franchise was one of those. Like, Stonekeep actually finally came out, but after a very tortured development cycle, and it just released to not great sales, and yet
lukewarm reception.
Michael Quarles.
I think Stonekeep is funny.
Yeah.
Because it has FMV actors.
But that was a project that was supposed to come out like 3 years prior to when it finally did come out, and under normal circumstances, in a better managed studio, you would cancel that project and just move on. Interplay was, under Brian Fargo especially, was very much like, we are going to stick it, we're going to keep going, we're going to find out how to solve these problems. Like,
Wow, what a great anecdote, Chris. I wonder what this has to do with the main subject of our show. So, they got the D&D license in the mid-1990s.
And had
They got it from SSI, who they basically outbid SSI, and TSR, the people who did the D&D, were in a bad state in the late 90s. This is right before they sold out to Wizards of the Coast, but I believe this game was in development while D&D was still being made in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and they said, well, we got this Descent engine. We got this D&D license. Let's mash these two together. And, these guys from Edmonton seem pretty excited about their engine they're making. Maybe we'll let them do something with that as well. I don't know. So you get...
There was also, like, rising competition, even though Interplay was doing more RPG work, or that was still, like, their bread and butter. Like, Bethesda kind of sort of made the transition to 3D CRPG development.
The Elder Scrolls Arena.
Looking Glass
and
Studios.
The Elder Scrolls Daggerfall.
Looking Glass had made Ultima Underworld, which is, the Stygian Abyss. So
System Shock.
So it seemed like, to the outside looking in, oh yeah, we probably should try to do something with the D&D license that's gonna be 3D. Like, that's probably a natural step you could make, except it's a very clear-cut case of what I would call garbage in, garbage out, because they decided, let's use an engine that was not programmed for role-playing games for a role-playing game.
To me, I know that's an important part of the story, and that's, in case people haven't figured it out yet, that's why it's called Descent to Undermountain. And, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, the fact that they used an engine that was not purpose-built for RPGs. You can retrofit anything onto anything engine-wise. I think the term engine is used pretty nebulously in a lot of cases. I think it's the scenario here, though, specifically where it is a 6 Degrees of Freedom shooter, specifically. An engine that was purpose-built for that, with software rendering, and, like, all these tricks it had to pull just to barely run on computers of that time at an acceptable state. And trying to bolt RPG mechanics onto that, onto a game with no systems for dialogue, for character interaction, for even having, like, flesh and blood characters that you interact with, for inventory. Yeah, all these things that, you can, theoretically, with enough time and skilled engineers and support from the original team and the original coders, implement those features. But why not just start from scratch at that point? Why not just use it as a sort of, a visualization of what you want? Why not just look at that engine and be like, oh, this gives us the idea to do our own thing in 3D, rather than building it atop this foundation, which is kind of shaky at best. And from my understanding, and you may know a little bit more about this, I'm deferring most of the history to you because this is a case where I did not completely immerse myself in the history outside of reading a few Usenet posts by some of the Interplay team who were complaining about the state of production while they were developing the game. But I think the idea was that Interplay wanted to market it, specifically because Descent was so successful. They wanted to say, and look what we can do with this engine, we can deliver an RPG on it. So the idea was sort of born that this would be a spin-off. It would buy them time while they developed a Descent 3 or what have you, and would keep that franchise alive.
Oh, Descent 3. Yeah, this entire game feels like it came name first. Like, they thought of the title, and they said, oh, Descent, Undermountain, those are both things.
Brand synergy at its finest.
Yeah, they gave it to a fairly small, not very experienced team of developers, including a plucky young fellow and future
sex pervert?
Future alleged sex criminal Chris Avallone. We don't need to get into the stuff about him, but this is like his second or third credited video game.
This game,
and they said, yeah, you think you can get it done in like 6 months? And it took 3 years.
They also had some other names associated with this game project. Probably the most notable was Steve Perrin, who was at that time, probably more well-known for his tabletop games, but we now know him as being the chief architect of RuneQuest.
Oh.
So they got some names. They paid for big names to join this project.
Or future big names.
Yeah, future big names. Like, Scott Benny was a part of, like, the Star Trek Starfleet Command series. So they were getting a lot of people who knew, like, the D20 system in particular to help out Chris Avallone. And I guess for those that knew, like, it is of no surprise that this game is one of many titles that use the second edition or AD&D rule set, which means on top of it having to calculate for 3D movement and weird axis targeting stuff, it's also got to calculate some very, let's say, is the word complicated?
I would not say AD&D is actually complicated, but I would
it's
say
nuanced.
It's unintuitive.
Yes. So
it's incredibly random, I can tell you that much from my experience.
Yeah, well, dice rolls.
Yeah, but even when you're, like, generating stats for a character, or, like, the amount of health points you get per level
if that number ain't 20, it's useless to you. So Thaco, Braden.
Thaco is not actually that complicated.
No, it's not.
Thaco is just attack bonus, but it's golf rules because Gary Gygax was into war games, and war games used golf rules.
But like, talking about Thaco and, like, AD&D's armor class situation and, like, how to do strength modifiers or how the old Vancian magic system worked, it really does communicate the fact that we have this Descent engine trying to work with these old school tabletop rules, and now you got to deal with like Z-axis 3D stuff, and now
and also it's real time.
Which I think that's the actual big problem here, is that this is in real time. You could have done something that is maybe pause to play, or pause movement,
real time with pause, like those fellows up north.
But this also being in real time leads to so many extra complications to the engine struggles.
And not just real time like Eye of the Beholder, because Eye of the Beholder is still running, in Eye of the Beholder and Menzo Baranzan and those Ravenloft games. Those are real time, but they're all still running in turns underneath the hood, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this game, because of the nature of what it is, can't do that.
No. So I guess the last thing about like the troubled production cycle that will kind of like, before I move into what is this video game, Braden, is the fact that this game comes out January 15th, 1998, and by all stretch of the words, I also checked those board posts, Cass. This was supposed to ship for Christmas 97. It was completely rushed to meet that.
Reviewers got it in around then.
It got eviscerated in the reviews, and then so they did a micro delay to January 15th. Funny thing, if you find the box art for this game, you'll notice that it mentions that the game has multiplayer support. That is not actually included. They released the game without a feature that they put and printed on the box.
Also, the box art is literally the box art is using the same art as the
Order of the Griffin
Westwood game, Warriors of the Eternal Sun, for the TurboGrafx 16, which itself is a book cover from one of Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms novels.
They just took Ed Greenwood art from a fantasy novel and then just pasted it onto the box.
Now, I do have to point out that the quip about the multiplayer thing, I believe that's only in certain release regions. I had the North American box art scans, and I got called out for it on the stream myself when I mentioned that little factoid, and nowhere on that box does it mention multiplayer. So it might have been speculation from my co-host and from chat was like the German release of it might have had that erroneous information. But
or early print runs.
Possibly. But
I know advertisements.
I know that there were like magazine previews where they were still talking about it like even months prior to release. But yeah, sure.
Oh no, absolutely. The marketing run for it was absolutely emphasizing the multiplayer because that was, in my mind, not as a D&D expert, as someone who's played a couple campaigns in my lifetime, but the whole point of D&D to me is the party.
Yeah.
Having people that you're questing with. And that multiplayer component, which I imagine would have been a cooperative experience, it would have had to have been, because you're certainly not doing PvP combat in this. You're not doing, like, arena shooting.
It's not Battlespire.
No.
But, like, without that, and it is just you, it is just your hero, the Kelbanites, as I've heard them referred to, and it is your solo mission against these impossible odds, and the power scaling on it is ridiculous to the point where you're, like, killing gods as a solo,
which is its own issue. The fact that who the primary antagonist is in the game and how this game ends, I can only imagine would really rub certain people who like the lore of D&D the wrong way. But yes, I think my favorite thing is I didn't play this game until this podcast, and the only thing I really knew of Descent to Undermountain, other than the fact that it was bad, is the fact that there is an Easter egg in Fallout 2 where if you shake a magic 8-ball enough times, it'll say gag lines that are about interplay, and one of them is, sorry about Descent to Undermountain. So they knew they put out a turd. Like, Interplay knew.
What's great is that magic 8-ball originates in this game. towards the end of the game, you find the Magic 8 Ball, and so that even the existence of the Magic 8 Ball itself in Fallout 2 is a reference to Descent to Undermountain, and interplays in incestuous ways.
Who was the lead on this Fallout 2 game? Oh, Chris Avallone. Weird.
Funny that.
And Fergus Urquhart.
Yes. But, that was after Tim Kaine and Jason Alexander and Leonard Boyarsky went off to Troika.
Try to do their own CRPG studio at the worst possible time.
We talked about.
But yeah, so Braden, if things worked, okay, let's ignore the fact that it does not work. If things worked, what is Descent to Undermountain?
Okay, Descent to Undermountain, I would describe, is an attempt to take the concept of a dungeon crawler, your standard AD&D dungeon crawler, and put it as a real-time action game. Because, Eye of the Beholder was real-time. Menzo Branzan and those Ravenloft games technically have full 360-degree movement. You should play them as tile-based games because you'll get less angry about it. But it is an attempt to have, the part where you go down a dungeon, in this case the dungeon of Undermountain, which is underneath the city of Waterdeep in the Forgotten Realms. It was Ed Greenwood's personal mega dungeon, in the same way that Castle Greyhawk was Gary Gygax's for the Greyhawk setting, and so on and so forth. And Undermountain is basically this massive mega dungeon underneath the biggest city in the world that is constantly shifting and changing around because a crazy wizard did it. And it's a good idea for a video game, because it doesn't have a set layout, it doesn't have a set theme.
It's more of a hex grid.
Yeah, you can do a fun house dungeon with Undermountain because it doesn't need to be natural, because it's a crazy wizard creating all of these different layers.
And when you consider what Descent is, which is a series of very rudimentary 3D corridors with a couple of enemies here and there, where you're kind of supposed to get lost in Descent and see what you encounter before you eventually get into the core parts of the story. A giant hex grid massive dungeon kind of makes sense if we're trying to make a Descent version of an RPG, right?
Here's the thing that always stood out to me in Descent to Undermountain, is that you hear about Hallister, the wizard responsible for Undermountain, and constantly throughout the narrative, that strong narrative that's reinforced so strongly by the characters in the game you interact with. They're talking about how Undermountain is ever shifting, ever changing, how, one day it can look like this, and then the next day another passage will open up and you'll have this whole other area to explore. It sounds like, the way they make it sound is as if it's going to be a randomly generated dungeon, which would be like, if you were to do an Undermountain type game today, is probably how someone would do that. They would probably do it like a sort of rogue experience where it is like a seed at the start generates something for you. That is not this game. This game is linear, or in the sense that it is a set progression of levels housed within four different hubs, and you unlock them by completing those missions in order. You unlock the next sequentially. Doors unlock for you. So very straightforward in that sense.
Yes. I would say it actively plays against the appeal of the mega dungeon, quote unquote.
Yeah. It's
you actually go to part of Undermountain in Neverwinter Nights, Hordes of the Underdark. That's the first area of the game. So I believe that is the only other video game appearance of Undermountain.
Well, I mean, when you did it perfectly in this game, why would you even try to imitate it? Why
Yeah,
would you even
yeah.
try
Why? So yeah, there are 4 hubs, and each of those it's a hub and spoke design, as they say, where each of these hubs goes off into different levels, and those levels will often have additional levels attached to them. So for the first area, you're dealing with kobolds and goblins and shadow thieves and at least one crypt of undead. But as you go further down, they pull out that monster manual, and they're like, what can we fight against next? How about some followers of Bane?
How about a
How
lot
about
of
some elementals?
Elementals.
Let's not forget about those tiny and big rats, and the small ones are actually worse than the big ones because they're harder to hit.
How about
their
some
hitbox is
goddamn
terrible.
dragons?
Yeah. Yeah, dragons.
Did you know
And,
that with the rats in the game, that if your character is not wearing boots is the only way they can hurt you? If you're wearing boots, they can't bite your feet.
I did find
That's
that
supposed
out.
to be a mechanic. Yeah.
But then also you just have to listen to those rat squeaks while you just try to ignore them over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah, like... So, I don't know how the rest of you felt, but after getting this thing to run on modern technology, which I don't know how things went for you, but that was not, let's say, a seamless process. It took some effort.
I had to remember how to use DOSBox configs again.
I just ran it through a virtual box, but you notice that something is wrong like within minutes. I don't know how you all felt, but like once you start moving, you're like, "Oh no. Oh no. Oh no."
I would say the only other game to trigger my immediate, like, this doesn't move correctly reflex in the same way is the 1.0 version of Underworld Ascendant, which I would say is maybe another Kusolstice tier video game, honestly, even fully patched up.
For this podcast, I think the last time that we felt like that sense of like, oh, something is wrong here, like this quickly, Cass, thank you once again. Like, Hoshiwo Mirahito was one. That's definitely there, where it's like, oh no, you picked the wrong speed for me to walk. Good game. What is this? This is not right.
Oh, these ladders.
Oh god, the ladders.
We'll get to the ladders.
We'll get to the ladders because they're their own thing. But like, also maybe Ultima 9, where things just like immediately just feel bad.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know, Cass. Like, how immediate was it for you to be like, no, this is not it. This is not it. This is not it.
It took me a little longer. This is a game I had played before, not in full. I thought I had played in full before beginning this full playthrough, but then I realized at a certain point, like, no, I never really made it past here. So I at least had a little background going into it. I will say the first thing that annoys me in the game, even before you get onto your movement, even before you start like operating your character, is going through that character creation and thumbing through the pages where you select your race, where you select all this stuff, where you have the randomly assigned stats that you have to drag and like do math on, and you can just hit that random button a million times until you get an actual decent stat spread. But past all that is the overworld map, which I think is one of the most baffling things I've ever seen in a video game.
Yeah.
So you have
it's adorable.
You have this picture of the city of Waterdeep in all its glory and in whole from a distance, and there are a grand total of 3 spots you can click on this map, as well as another spot, the city gates, which exits the game. In the center of town, there is the marketplace where you buy and sell items. At the top center, there is Blackstaff's Tower, where Kelvin gives you all your missions, where Jim Cummings stands in front of torches and a digitized sprite talks at you and tells you what you need to do. That's where you go back after every quest to turn in and get your reward and get told what you're doing next. And then there's the tavern, the what's it called? The whispering something?
The yawning portal.
It is,
oh no, wait, no, that's later. Sorry.
Yeah, the yawning portal.
Oh, it
yes,
is.
the yawning
Okay.
portal is...
The yawning portal. So where do you think this, where 99% of the game takes place, is going into this tavern and going down this elevator that takes you into Undermountain? You would probably put that, like, you'd make it, like, highlighted on the map, maybe put a big arrow above it to point it out. You'd put it in the center of the map where it's easy to find. No, they were insistent that this map of Waterdeep, that this portrait of Waterdeep is lore accurate. So, to access the yawning portal, you click on the innocuous building nestled between 50 identical buildings on the far left-hand side of the screen.
Yes.
One of the most baffling.
Well, those other
truly-
buildings never become usable or interactable at any point. They're just there for lore reasons.
Yes.
I wonder if perhaps you would, let's say, click on one of those buildings to party up with someone for multiplayer. Who's to say? But in the game we got, yeah, there are those 3 interactable things on that map, and the rest of it is empty space.
So we talk about when the game feels off. We talk about, you go into the yawning portal, you get into your character's shoes. We should probably talk a bit about, the character classes of AD&D in a second, but I do want to say that, it is ship movement to an extent. You are grounded, at least for a large portion of the game. By the end of it, you unlock the ability to fly, and it almost makes sense at that point. You still get caught on every piece of geometry in the world by that point in the game.
Thieves
but at
get
least
to
makes
walk
a
on
sort of
walls.
sense.
You get you're supposed to get these, freeing things that allow you to more freely do the descent thing. I think that's where they were coming, Cass, with that, is so it's running the descent engine, so we gotta have stuff that reminds people that we have this thing called a Z-axis. So thieves at more advanced levels get to walk on walls, and wizards can fly, and all sort of stuff. And then you're still...
And by endgame, everyone can fly.
Yeah.
By endgame, you pick up rings of flying and boots of flying that just say, these last dungeons you need to be able to fly, and we realized that not all of you were speccing in a way that allowed you to fly, so we have to give you something.
It allows you to avoid those goddamn ladders.
That's true. But I do want to say, I want to circle back to our choices of character class. Now,
Yes.
The traditional wisdom for this game that I had heard was cleric, because there's only 4 classes in A&D. There's fighter, thief, cleric, and mage.
Well, only 4 in this game. There's no paladins, rangers,
Bards.
or bards.
That's classic AD&D, though, isn't it?
Or druids.
Or a classic D&D
No.
in general. I remember there was a point in time where D&D was only those 4 classes.
Well, no,
So
because elves
that's-
were considered a class in old school D&D.
Yeah. Cass, I don't want to put you down this hole where I explain the difference between the white box and basic D&D versus advanced D&D and the changes they made from 1st to 2nd edition, because I know this because I am cursed. I am cursed with the curse of remembering pointless information, and I'm not going to inflict this upon you, but
fair enough. But 4 classes in this game.
the 4 core classes, essentially.
In traditional wisdom, on message board wisdom, and the one guide that exists for this game, the one plain text file that serves as a guide, a very bad guide, but the only guide you'll find. Everyone says play as cleric, so you can heal yourself and have some amount of HP and some amount of combat prowess. So I went with multi-class fighter thief, because you multi-class in this game, which denied me all the magic in the game. But I could certainly pick locks, except in 1.0 you can't equip your lockpick, so you can't pick locks. So
Great.
That was an issue. You can climb walls, except you can't climb walls if you have any item equipped at that time, so I didn't realize that until very late in the game. So I wasn't climbing walls at all. You can move silently. I ended up not doing that at all because there's really no way to stealth in this game, because everyone will just immediately be facing you when you walk into a room 9 times out of 10. You can detect traps as a thief. I think, and this is where I think it did come in handy, is that I think any class can technically do search mode to recognize triggers and traps and stuff. And I think the thief just automatically has that on at all times without having to activate that. which gives you the tooltips and that little like DM Dungeon Master portion of the screen, which is always on screen unless you go into the full like no HUD mode, which is not recommended in terms of frame rate.
DOSBox
do not
does
do that
like.
mode. By the way, I'm glad you mentioned it. Do not do that mode that Cass just mentioned. If you want to have an even bad time with Descent to Undermountain, that mode is, I don't even know why they included it.
Oh no, you can make it work.
Included it.
You have to increase the mem
work.
size limit in DOSBox from the
but
default 16
you have
to 64.
It's one of those things where by default, because this is such a late era DOS game, DOSBox has trouble with spots. So for example, the Interplay intro video just does not play.
Yeah, that's a codec error. That's I had to figure that out for myself when I was ripping those video files, and it's just because DOSBox doesn't have the tool to decode those videos on the fly, those .mve files. Had to use a Baldur's Gate 2 key I had in order to open up a utility that lets you decode and convert those files. But yeah, so you can put no intro in the command line when you launch the game just to skip that stuff, which will save you some headache. Otherwise, you have to mash escape to get through that stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, there are ways to make it work in DOSBox. But, ultimately, people running DOS-era machines, when this game launched, it was not performant at all. So the accurate experience would be that view mode not being really functional in terms of frame rate, in terms of control, in terms of smoothness. And that really speaks for the whole game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to tidy up my point by saying that The Thief did not seem like a great idea.
No.
I stuck to it. It's beatable. You can finish the game theoretically with any build. I wouldn't recommend it. How did Magic treat you? I imagine a whole lot better.
So, So, Cass, in general, it's especially advanced Dungeons & Dragons, like, thieves are not very good in video game versions of D&D because most of their utility is out of combat, right? So it's, lock picking, it's detecting traps, it's
charisma checks.
Yeah, it's
which never come up in this game.
No.
It's the ability to listen at doors,
which by default would mean that certain stats that might be high with your character are completely irrelevant in Descent to Undermountain because you ain't doing like charisma checks in this game.
I don't even think charisma affects merchant prices.
I think it's supposed to. It's supposed to, but I may not in different versions of the game.
It probably doesn't.
I think it's supposed to. There's a couple of checks I recognized.
It doesn't Baldur's Gate.
I noticed a couple of checks. Like, for example, one of the patrons of the tavern is this fighter, is this a dwarven fighter, I believe, who you can place a bet with. To, like, he says, I bet you're going to die when you go into Undermountain. And how about 100 gold? And you can say, make it 200. Or you can say, how about that sword of yours? And you can sort of, at a later point, come back and say, well, I survived, so pay up now. And I think that, whether they take you up on that bet, will be charisma-based. I think there's a couple of dialogue checks. But ultimately, pointless. Ultimately, useless. Ultimately, all the things I spec'd into, none of them ever came up.
Yeah, so magic is not as freeing as you want, and one of the reasons is that this game is following AD&D rules, which means the mage starts with exactly one level 1 magic spell, and that's it until you rest.
Yeah, but it's not fully Vancian. It's you don't have to worry about slots, at least.
But it is
But you get one
for you to rest, which you might be thinking, oh, okay, so, like, it's a big dungeon. It's ultimately 4 hubs and several interconnected, like, tunnels that basically move you into the different hubs, full of traps and optional areas and NPCs to pick up quests and do things. But the big problem with having that normal spell level system from AD&D is there are not enough places for you to rest in this game. So if you start as a mage and you pop your little spell on just a random little rat or some sort of spider,
you cast Burning Hands once.
You got nothing. You are going to go back to that little staff or that knife.
It's a little, and you're going to go to that one little Ankh symbol in the first area of the first hub that lets you rest.
And
That's
you're just
going
to go back and forth, back and forth. And like I said, there just aren't enough places for you to rest in this game to restore those spell slots. There really aren't.
Yeah.
to work as a solo mage.
That is an issue through the game.
And-
I figured that the way they would balance it out is by giving you so many staffs, letting you buy like staffs from the merchant, so you can just like fall back on those. So you have some sort of
scrolls.
magic offense. Yeah, that sort of stuff. But like, yeah, without rest slots, and like, by what level? I think the level cap in this game is 7.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you're getting up to level 4 spells, some of which are pretty nice.
Which means you would only have 4 level 1s, 3 level 2s, 2 level 3s, and 1 level 4. That's it.
something like that.
It's
yeah,
4, 3, 2, 1. I remember the chart, Braden. If we're stuck at level 7.
I'm proud of you.
But also,
except for specialist wizards who get an extra spell per level.
And then you have your wisdom modifier, which might give you at level 7. Oh, no, wait. The wisdom modifier starts at 8.
wisdom modifiers for clerics, and yeah, I believe clerics get extra spells with a higher wisdom, but wizards
Wouldn't.
only get a higher spell. Do not get higher spell slots in this game. They do in AD&D.
God dang it. So, like, anything to, like, give you more freedom with the combat, because let's just be honest, like, using weapons kind of sucks. It's monotonous.
yeah.
You are flailing
You're
around.
flailing around with, like, one weapon, doing, like, the Morrowind technique of, like, just keep doing it, because it's a, as Cass hinted at, it's a dice roll. So the dice roll...
Half your attacks will just whiff.
half your attacks are just going to whiff, so if you just keep hitting the hit button over and over again and as fast as you can, you'll probably eventually hit this thing that is functioning under the same rules. And
Oh, but
Well, you say the AI that the enemies that you face are functioning in the
Yes.
same role. It's not always the case. Many of the enemies just have their AI turned off completely.
yeah,
yeah, no,
fair
sometimes the enemies will just stand there and just kind of their all of their limbs will just kind of flail out in
they get stuck
numerous
in the
different
geometry
directions.
a lot. They have as hard of
Yeah.
a time
Yeah.
navigating the geometry as you do.
So that evens the playing field a little bit, at least. So
Yes,
that's something to look forward to.
And just to talk about magic one more second, for some godforsaken reason, one of the things they decided to take as written from the player's handbook, the AD&D player's handbook, is you know how spells will have a casting time of like 1 round or X number of rounds? What if you implemented that in real time, so it takes a literal minute of real time to cast the spell Mage Armor?
Very cool. Can I also say that this slavish devotion to the D&D handbook, the AD&D handbook, is maybe one of the least accessible, most annoying fucking things I have to deal with. So, in a typical RPG, you pick up different
Yes.
weapons, different armors, and you'd be able to go into like some sort of inventory display panel that says, here's the stats this confers to you. Here's what
Yes.
this does versus this weapon. Here's
Oh,
an idea
yeah,
of how
no.
much damage this does versus another thing.
They don't tell you any of that shit in this game. I can tell you it because I'm broken. But once again, I've played a lot of Baldur's Gate.
Like, what is
So I can tell
materially
you.
the difference between a ring of shield and a +2 ring of protection?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know there's they have different prices in the marketplace, so I assume the more expensive one conveys a stronger benefit to me. And you can
Yes.
check the manual. I did check the manual. It wasn't very helpful because they don't tell you any damage numbers for any of the fucking weapons.
No.
So I had to be like, okay, is
They-
the
they-
dagger better than the long sword? Is the bastard sword better than this? Is a +2 bastard sword better than a +3 dagger? I'll never fucking know.
They don't even have
And you-
everything in the manual, by the way, because sometimes you feel like, okay, well, I don't know what the right strategy is for this monster or this thing, so why don't I go into the appendix and find the monster section of the manual? Maybe it's going to be there. Not everything's in there.
No.
Do they mention trolls in there and how they regenerate unless you like set them on fire?
So that's page 79, so give me a minute here. So Braden, say something real quick.
Okay, so when I played Baldur's Gate 2 as a lad, there is a dungeon early in that game that you will probably do. The Denaris Hold, which is the stronghold quest for fighters, and it's also how you get what's her bucket, the shitty mage thief who's not Imoen, Nalia. And the hold has been taken over by trolls. So the way the game gives you the resources to deal with an entire dungeon of trolls is to just give you an absolute shit ton of fire and acid arrows.
By the way, I don't think there's any elemental arrows or coated arrows for if you decide to go archery in this game. But it doesn't matter because you can fire 100 arrows per second if you click that fast, because there's no cooldown time on how fast you can fire arrows. You can machine
gun those arrows.
So that's good, at least, for a non-magic user like myself.
Yeah. So it does say that they regenerate health, and they make a special note here that says, trolls are extremely difficult to kill. But, like, you know, to go back to a point that Cass suggested about how, man, this would make sense if, like, you had more than one character. This game just being your dude or your person, just plugging along in this really bad dungeon with just a very limited tool set, with no recourse when you kind of expend resources too quickly, it just makes it so much harder. And it makes you realize that sometimes you're just gonna die. And sometimes it's you literally opened a door and you didn't turn quick enough to notice this thing attacking you diagonally to the right of you in time, and now you're dead. And now you're just dead.
And yeah, because it's AD&D and because you are a low level for the first several hours of this game. You can go from max to 0 HP very quickly, and did we mention that the game will just roll for HP without you? That's one of those things that I think I think rolling for HP is fun in tabletop. In a video game, especially a single player video game,
you just want the maximum.
I want the average.
Just give me the average at the very least.
That's what Pathfinder, Kingmaker, and Wrath of the Righteous do, is they give you the average.
So I also want to say that we talk about Dungeons and Dragons rules, and you know, the Dungeons and Dragons experience and how that's translated to this game.
Yes,
and it's already off on a bad foot when you're just playing as a singular person in the dungeon, and the quests that you're given feel appropriately D&D, I suppose. You know, recovering family relics and heirlooms, rescuing people from within the depths, cleansing tombs of a curse.
They name drop all of your favorite Forgotten Realms deities.
But
like Kasuth the Fire Lord.
And another thing this game has is it does have side quests.
Yes.
I don't think I completed more than 2 of them successfully, because here's the issue that I ran into in version 1.0, which I spent most of my playthrough playing just as some sort of cruel joke on myself, I suppose, is that when you speak to characters, they speak out of sequence.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Well,
every time you engage in dialogue with a character in 1.0, they skip ahead to you've talked to this character before. So any conversation pieces you were supposed to get the first time you talk to them, like character introductions or anything of that sort, get skipped over. So half the characters will be like, I told you, I don't have anything to say to you. The other half will be instantly hostile, instantly aggro on you because you're interrupting them. And the other half will just not respond at all. So that makes half the side quests in the game just completely inaccessible.
That was not the case in the 1.3 version.
Yeah, they fixed that in 1.2. I did patch at the very end, and I recognized them immediately.
Yeah,
let's go down bugs.
Break down bugs. How the patches.
Yeah, so the original release of the game that I played, all text in the game is uppercase. There's no lowercase letters in the text parser, so it makes a lot of the text very difficult to read at a glance. Every character has what I call happy feet, where because of issues with their geometry or issues with, like, you know, where the coordinates, I suppose. Every time you encounter a character who has moving limbs, their limbs are in a constant state of like wobbling and flipping around, doing full circles. When you kill people, their legs will continue to spin and spin and spin as if they're like Sonic the Hedgehog revving up for a dash. So that's definitely an issue. There's a lot of issues as far as characters. So I mentioned the conversation issue already. Quests that you just simply cannot access. Quests that are simply broken, parts of the game that are less optimized than they are in later revisions, if you can believe that shit. Traps that don't trigger properly, necessary progression that doesn't trigger properly, like bringing down ramps so you can like get up, go up a thing. You flip a switch to make a ramp go up, and it just doesn't appear because that trigger is broken. A lot of Hall of Mirror effects, basically everywhere you go. Certain skills not working properly. I think the AC stat is completely broken in the 1.0 release. That whatever number it doesn't say, whatever number it says, doesn't actually matter.
Oh no!
There are unclimbable ladders.
No,
really?
No.
So which
not
version
in 1.0?
Which version of the game introduced the unclimbable ladders?
That's something I wanted to point out. The ladder glitch, which, bear in mind, if you don't have the ability to fly, there are places where you need to climb ladders to progress, to get to areas of the game that you need to see in the early game. In 1.0, ladders worked consistently for me.
Okay.
I never had issues where I got stuck at the top of them. I would get to the top, and it would force me forward on top of it. There were issues going down ladders, where I would try to go down a ladder, and I would just drop and take fall damage, and that was fucking annoying. But at least I could get up.
This game is also weirdly punishing with fall damage.
Yeah.
But at least I could get up. I patched to version 1.2. Ladder glitch immediately kicks in. And the ladder glitch in this game, for those who don't know what we're talking about, is an issue wherein anytime you attempt to climb a ladder, you will reach the top of said ladder, and then you will get stuck. Mm-hmm. You will try to jump off of it. You will try to unuse it, like by pressing the F key again, or whatever key you use for use. You can try all manner of combination of keys and perspectives. You cannot climb to the top of ladders.
I had to finagle myself off the ladders by unequipping my weapon, re-equipping it, and then pressing the control key, which would then launch me upwards.
Well, you found a way.
I ended up trying... This is part of the reason why my mage eventually multi-classed as a thief, so is that I could just get the ability to walk on walls.
Oh, one more glitch I mentioned. Did I mention in 1.0 you can't equip the lockpicks, thereby eliminating a complete, an entire section of the thief build? Just want to make sure that. And that you can't climb walls if you have
of course.
Any item equipped at all.
Regardless of which version you're playing, whether it's 1.0, 1.1, or 1.3, just the game... there are weird slowdowns, enemies that are floating midair. The AI, as we've already said, is broken where it's not responding or behaving correctly. And just it's a sluggish mess, even without these glitches.
This game is maybe the closest I've had in a while to seeing something melt in front of you.
The closest thing I can compare it to for my bad game encyclopedia here, the closest point of comparison for me is a little game by the name of Ride to Hell Retribution.
Yeah.
I'll famously bring up. There's a part in the PC version of that game, maybe in the console versions too, where you're in an airplane scrapyard, and for whatever reason, code literally appears above your head. You see variables and strings hovering above Jake's head, your player character, in that section of the game. You literally see the code. And for me, that was a true moment of this is how the sausage is made. Being literally able to see the code like I'm fucking Neo tuning into the Matrix.
Yes.
And that is the closest point of comparison I can drive this. Not to get to my conclusion here, because I know we have plenty more to talk about, but let me just say that this game is fascinating from a game designer standpoint. If you are someone who is passionate about developing games in 3D, please play this game and just marvel at it, because you see it laid bare in front of you. Every issue, you will be able to immediately determine the cause of it. those floating limbs and whatnot is like clearly like some coordinate issue, or the issue of enemies not attacking you is because like their coordinates have them like inside the ground, so they're not actually like in the same room space as you, so they can't actually see you and activate their AI. Like, you will figure things out from looking at this. You will get such a crash course in what not to do. It is fascinating, deeply charming, deeply compelling in that sense.
Yes.
Maybe one of the most busted games that I've been able to finish from A to B.
Yes.
To be sure.
Like, you compare this to some other infamously buggy and unfinished games. We played Ultima 9 a couple months ago, and that game, even in its fully patched state, is jank as fuck. Or Might and Magic 9 is another one where that game was blatantly unfinished, but Ultima got patched like 12 times, and Might and Magic 9, like the version you can buy on GOG, straight up has the fan patch that makes it playable, and then you just have to deal with the part where it's an unfinished mess of a game that is running on the Lith tech engine.
Can I say a quick anecdote about Might and Magic 9?
Yes.
Someone in my Discord community, we have a hang room, we have a call that basically goes on every day, and people will stream out whatever it is that are playing, and people can watch and tune in. I'm usually there playing something or other. Someone was playing Might and Magic 9, and I recognized it as Might and Magic 9, and I'm like, oh, that's Might and Magic 9. What a throwback. And I know this game is completely busted, right? And they're like, yeah, but I still love it anyway. It's my favorite bad game. Other people start joining the call. People don't know what the game is. And they're like, what is this? And they say Might and Magic 9. Like, what year did this come out? Because
2002, baby.
Everyone across the board, we became a joke that people would join and be like, what is this? And I'm like, guess what year this game came out? 97? 98? Wrong.
Yeah.
With these models that look like GoldenEye on the N64.
Yeah. So, Cass, I have a level of fondness for Might and Magic 9 because that game, as it is, even though it's half finished, it's still a Might and Magic game, and so I have a certain level of fondness for it. I don't think it's like good.
Nah.
I think you should play, I don't know, 6 or 7, but I think 9 is like one of the more playably bad games of my personal bad game portfolio.
Playably bad. I'm trying to...
Playably bad.
Now, is Descent
it's
to
a trash
Undermountain,
fave.
is DTU playably bad to you?
No.
No. So that's where my comparison wraps back around, is compared to Ultima 9 and Might and Magic 9, to infamously buggy video game releases, there is no version of Descent to Undermountain that does not feel like it is destroying itself. And I ran into a repeatable crash bug in the last dungeon of the first hub area, the Shadow Thieves, where I would run up and fight these two thieves right in front of a door, and the game would crash without fail. Every single time. So that's why I was unable to finish the video game. And there's some jank with Ultima and geometry and stuff, but the version of that game you can play now is playable. It's still Ultima 9. It's not good, but it works mostly as intended. This game did not get that treatment. There is no fan patch for Descent to Undermountain. There's no attempt to port this game into the various Descent source ports.
And you mentioned like the number of times that like people from Origin like genuinely tried to patch Ultima 9, and people who went back and tried to patch Might and Magic 9. Interplay just wanted to move on. They wanted to just they dumped this out.
They
cut their losses. All of the people who worked on this game, whether it was the voice team or the creative leads, like they made it very clear that they thought the game was doomed from the start. Most people pointed fingers at what they thought were the sources for this game's struggles, and
it was the management.
And overall, yeah, every person who worked on this game has made it very clear they want to have nothing to do with Descent to Undermountain ever again.
And Cass, this is something that I think you can identify with. Is are you aware of the fan attempt to fix Tomb Raider: Angel of Darkness?
I've heard of it. I haven't played it.
Yeah. So I think about that. I think about Sonic Project 06.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that
which
one too.
Which is a fan attempt to basically make a functional version of Sonic 06, another game that I would argue falls in the category of is constantly falling apart in front of you.
I'd agree.
And I think there's nothing like that for this. This game is a complete black hole of sentiment.
I mean, we had to beg you, Cass, to give us a guide because we couldn't find anything on game FAQs.
I couldn't find the fucking invisible walls.
Yeah,
oh, by the
fun.
way,
like
there are invisible walls in this game, which are a key component to a lot of the quests and side quests and dungeons.
Yeah.
You know what's awesome? In the Kobold's Den, there's a secret door is one of the first things you find in there that gives you armor that you can use for the rest of the game. It gives you these Bracers of Defense AC4, which for a thief build, is like the only armor you ever need. So, just immediately like, okay, here's my endgame armor. So that was a fun little treat. But yeah, 99% of the game is behind hidden walls. Like that's maybe a slight exaggeration that you have to be like bumping and grinding against every goddamn wall.
And that's the kind of thing that would make way more sense in a party or in a tabletop setting, right?
Where you're moving along in a grid, turn-based, rather than real-time, and needing to deal with, like, little bullshit things like rats biting your feet. Yeah, just man. I mean, I'm glad I played this game. I really am, because I can now safely say that this game, reputationally, is as bad as its reputation suggests. I don't think that anyone's coming to this game's defense. Like, Cass, you actually made me kind of rethink about a lot of the things that when you were on with the Hoshuo Mirohito, it's like, yeah, you're right. I think I need to be understanding of, like, what goes into these bad games. And, like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to write just this vehemently negative post about Hoshuo Mirohito. This game is not... this game's not that kind of bad, right? This isn't the right type of bad. Am I wrong in saying that?
Once again, Ultima 9, we played that recently. And I feel like it's bad, but you can see why it is the way it is. You can understand why it is a disappointment, even if you aren't an Ultima fan. This game is exactly the piece of shit everyone said it was.
Yeah, but you understand why, of course. Like when you understand the interplay backstory, and like all the trouble developments.
But I think this game is also like rotten from the outset. Up, Cass, is there anything you want to say from your adventures deeper down in the dungeon? That you want to bring up, because you got further than either of
Cass,
us.
how does this game end?
You kill Lolth.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, you don't know. No.
You blow up the flame sword because you collect pieces of the spider amulet, which is like, sort of like this background quest you're doing the entire game. You discover these pieces of the spider amulet, which control this flame sword, which is apparently like this almighty world-destroying weapon. You stop a Drow plot to flood the city of Underdeep or destroy Waterdeep from within, and then you kill Lolth in the final cutscene, where it's revealed
the Avatar of Lolth,
where it's revealed that no matter what character you pick, no matter what race or class you picked, you are a human male thief. in the FMV cutscene that plays as you
Yeah.
walk up to the flame sword. And then
Yeah.
Waterdeep is saved and you retire happily, I assume. I do want to say a few things about the game, though. Which is to say that, I have some sympathy for the devil here in understanding how this game came to be the way it is. And, we talk about these fan remakes of things or fixes through, like, these source ports and whatnot. And I really would be curious to see what that would look like for Descent to Undermountain. Because, at its core, there is a full adventure here. You go from location to location. You engage with characters. You can make some choices as to how you want certain quests to play out, who you side with in certain instances. You can theoretically like buddy up with like the Shadow Thieves rather than decimating them, I think, depending on how you play. There's clearly an ambition here. Again, I think it needs that multiplayer component, and that would obviously be the hardest part of the equation to solve for in trying to get something like a fix up and running other than just like doing it from the ground up, which I don't really know about that. Like that Sonic 06 like remake project, that's at a certain point you're fixing everything wrong with the game. You're making changes. How close is it going to mirror the original? There's another version of Sonic 06 you can play, which is just a version that will patch your build for RPCS3 or Xenia, the PS3 and 360 emulators. And so you get like, you can toggle like what fixes and quality of life stuff you want.
Okay.
And I feel like for something to Descent to Undermountain, which, is technically playable, you could theoretically launch it in DOSBox and tweak some settings to get a frame rate out of it, to get some performance out of it. You can do things to make it as playable as Descent to Undermountain is able to be playable. I would recommend for any sickos who are listening to this and thinking like they want to give it a shot for themselves, play the 1.0 release because the latter glitch is just so game-stopping. Or alternatively, I think probably the best way to play this game would be to play the 1.2 or 1.3 and to cheat yourself a Ring of Flying or something, so you can just, like, play it as if it were like Descent.
Yeah, play it like Descent.
Yeah, because that almost works. But yeah, between the combat being what it is and not particularly exciting or engaging, between the limitations on those character classes that are placed on all of them, like, suffering no matter how you slice it, just the inability to engage with it as you would, like, a Dungeons & Dragons type game with a party, with quests that make sense, that trigger properly, yeah, it's a tougher sell for me. Like, it was easier to defend Hoshiwa Morihiro on the merits of what it was attempting to do and the ideas it trafficked in, and being an older game that didn't necessarily have the time to reflect on what a JRPG should be, other than looking at Dragon Quest and maybe Hydlide. But this game, had the benefit of, at least some Dungeons & Dragons video game tie-ins existing at that point they could model themselves off of or take cues from. Had the benefit of Descent coming out to teach you, like, what worked in Descent was that speedy 6 degrees of freedom combat. And just every decision made here was the wrong one. And that's the thing I keep coming back to, is that every choice they could have made was the wrong choice. The only right choice they made, and this is another thing that is lost in upgrading from version 1.0 to 1.2 or 1.3, is that if you access the credits from the main menu of version 1.0, rather than playing credits music behind the credits, you get a recording of an Interplay Offices meeting where Chris Avallone talks about, okay, so we need to pick a closing song for the credits. We have a budget of $8, and people throwing around joke suggestions for what they might want to do, like For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica. Can we license that? That is the most authentic and honest bit of the game that exists there. And so, of course, they had to remove it and replace it with generic score music in all future releases and revisions of the game because they had too much fun there. Descent to Undermountain, I think, is definitely worthy of its reputation, as you said. It's very hard to defend outside of saying that it's charming or it had ideas, it had concepts. There is content in there that you can't fucking access because the game will find spectacular ways to break on you, whether it's not being able to climb up ladders or getting stuck inside of doors because you can only go in one way and not out the same way, doors that just don't open because of like broken triggers or scripting or what have you, traps that don't trigger, all these things that exist to just completely stop your progress dead in its tracks. If you didn't run into the glitch that you ran into in the Shadow Thieves area, you would have found something else later. That's just the inevitability of it, is that at some point in the game, you will run into something that completely kills your progress. and without the benefit of like functionally written guides.
Yes.
I guess you could watch our playthrough, and that could get you through like some of it, maybe. I certainly didn't do any of the side quests because I couldn't, because they were all fucking broken for me.
No, this game's documentation is like shockingly bad.
Right.
For, you know, we've definitely played a couple games where it's like I've had to go to weird corners of the internet to find a guide. Wizards and Warriors 2000 is one of those, and Cass, I like that game a lot. I think you would get a kick out of that game's technical shortcomings.
Very likely.
I don't think it's bad, though, but yes, it's an interesting experiment. As we determined on our podcast cast, we consider it an evolutionary dead end in the CRPG evolutionary tree.
Yeah, it's a weird vestigial limb of the dungeon crawler that was never followed up on again. This game, I had to ask you for the walkthrough, because the only real documentation of like walkthroughs for this game is that and several playthroughs on YouTube. There are more now than there used to be, because I remember looking this up ages ago, and there was like one playthrough of a guy that was not finished.
And now there's mine. Search Bad Game Hall of Fame, Descent to Undermountain on YouTube.
That's right. I think this game is just fundamentally rotten on a technical level, and I would love to see an attempt to fix it, but it's one of those things where this is like the worst possible case for when EA had BioWare move all of their projects to Frostbite.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you can read those Jason Schreier articles about Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda to see how that turned out.
It turned out well.
Yeah. We love Anthem in this house. But it just feels like fundamentally they started from a negative point, and they were never able to make up that gap.
Like ever.
And they were very open about that on Usenet, because it was 96, 97. Yep. And you can still find those Usenet posts. Do we want to talk about those?
Google groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. I don't have the post in front of me. I don't know if you have a few of those, but yeah, they were during development of the game, during active development, you could find people on the Interplay staff. I don't remember the names of who exactly, but they were just posting, being like, yeah, this is a shit show. We don't know what the fuck we're doing, basically. This is turning out horrible. Interplay is screwing us at every turn. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. Basically just, like, anti-marketing. Basically telling anyone who would listen, just, like, don't. This is going to come out bad. We can't, like, fix this. It's not going to turn out. Which is shocking.
You should not... If you're a game developer, I would not recommend doing that. Because now your management can read the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking for like interviews. There aren't that many on the internet. I would have to like go into the PC magazines of the time to really get anything out of that. But this, I feel like, Cass, you really hit the nail on the head as far as like, you can learn a lot from just looking at this game. I don't think even if this game worked as intended, it'd be a great, like, well-remembered D&D game.
But it'd be competent. It'd be at least okay if it like was fixed.
Yeah, it'd be playable. Like, I think the dungeon design and the variety of dungeons is like, you can see some genuine inspiration there, some fun DMing, going on.
I also want to say, just as one positive note, that the game is not a looker by any stretch of the imagination.
It's muddy.
There's a famous quote about the SVGA graphics bringing like ultra realism, and then you'll see the screenshot of that one lady in the yawning portal who is just like
the square
with
head.
a square head. But on some level, there are like a couple neat technical tricks. There's tinted glass you can look through, which will color like the image on the other side of it. And I don't know, there's something about that blocky aesthetic. Like there's what people will call the PS1 aesthetic nowadays that is still, charming to me. I don't mind looking at the game. Even muddy as it may be, and as repetitive as a lot of the dungeons get to be at a certain point.
It's not just the dungeons that are repetitive. It's like the enemy encounters are incredibly repetitive.
Oh,
some
for sure.
of the audio cues.
They recolor some of those models in true D&D
the
fashion.
music, when it's not breaking and just stops,
it's all right.
It's fine, but it's very generic. But like the audio cues for every enemy,
decent.
especially when you make contact with a weapon, it's just so repetitious, and it becomes a blur. Like this game becomes a blur.
But it's okay. Jim Cummings, don't phone it in.
He's trying.
Do you know
there's
a line? There's a folder on the CD called Stuff, and there are some unused Kelvin lines there. And you can hear Jim Cummings. I actually have the audio clip here. I can play it over Discord soundboard. I'll have to send it to you as a separate file afterwards.
Yes.
But
I think you're kind of cute.
So you can get that line. Jim Cummings can call you cute if you are looking for that.
Not since not since his work in Splatterhouse 2010.
Oh yeah, that's right. Love that game too.
Which that game is not great, but he's doing great in it. But after this, several months after this, Fallout 2 comes out, and then Baldur's Gate comes out, and we enter what a lot of people consider to be the golden era of CRPGs.
Do you think if this game had been started later on an engine that wasn't Descent, but still something in 3D, and had been released contemporaneously during that golden age, like, would it have had any chance there?
Maybe, yes. I think this game definitely could have found an audience, especially if it shipped with multiplayer.
Yeah, that's a big portion. That's a big component that we would absolutely have to nail down.
Because, we like the Might and Magic 6. And that was 98. And that game is not trying... that game is doing rendered 3D environments with sprites for all the characters, and...
I'm pretty unconvinced that it would have worked, though, because the game at the time of its release was already pushing the technical limits of the platforms it was releasing on, and one of those complaints going back to the reviews when this game launched was the fact that I could barely get this to run. It's too demanding.
I wonder
if it came out a little later, they would have had the benefit of 3D accelerators.
If it came out in the Windows 98 era, maybe. I think. I think about how id, when they were making Quake, it was originally going to be an RPG, and they had all of these really ambitious ideas, and over time they realized they were too hard to implement into a 3D engine, so Quake became Quake. And I think about this and as maybe a reason why fully polygonal real-time RPG would have been hard in the 90s, because what's this game's closest contemporary? It's like Daggerfall, right?
Yeah. Or Ultima Underworld.
Ultima Underworld.
Yeah, or Ultima Underworld.
Which still wasn't fully 3D like this game.
But Ultima Underworld was, like 92 and still very sprite-based.
And, it also takes place, like, largely underground.
Yes.
But yeah.
I mean, yeah, but Daggerfall is seen as a cult classic. I fucking love Daggerfall, especially now that
the Unity
play
edition
a version of that
doesn't
game.
force you or doesn't cause you to fall through the floor and end up in the pit.
You don't have to fall through the floor. It's great. it runs at a decent frame rate.
Let's rank this thing.
Let's rank this bitch.
Okay. Oh God.
All right, so
All
I'm
right,
thinking
you
top
can
10,
find
top
our
20.
list at yeah. You can find our list at bit.ly/OTDE rank. Once again, the URL is bit.ly/OTDE rank. All right, so our top 3 games are Might and Magic 6: The Mandate of Heaven at number 1, the original Suikoden at number 2, and Xenosaga Episode 1 Der Wilder Macht at number 3. Maybe one day we'll play Xenosaga 2, who's to say? At the bottom, though, at 52, we have Aiden Chronicles the First Mage. At 53, we have Unlimited Saga. And at 54, we have Hoshiwo Mirohito. So, where do you think we should start on this one?
Now, I couldn't convince you to put it in, 40, right? I couldn't go that high. I think it's going to be...
All right. So let's.
Here's the thing. This game is less racist than Jade Empire.
I should give it a point.
Number 40.
Yeah, I should give it a point then. All right, new 39.
But
No.
Okay. How about here's my actual point of comparison that I want to make.
Virtual highlight.
And Cass, you feel free to pitch in where I think comparing this to Pool of Radiance, Ruins of Myth Draenor, and Virtual Highlight.
I can definitely speak to Virtual Highlight,
Okay.
which I think it's a crime is at 49. That should be legitimately in top 30 for me. But then again, I'm a sicko.
Here's the thing.
I'm twisted.
I respect Virtual Highlight so much.
When you're not engaging with its mechanics and all you're doing is running and just running past enemies, it's funny.
It's a very funny video game.
I would certainly say that Descent to Undermountain is worse than a Virtual Highlight.
Yeah.
I would as well.
Now, I guess I dare to ask you, because, I know my shtick is standing up for these games, but I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
This one was rough.
Mm-hmm.
I see the
Yeah.
game. It's like how a sculptor sees the sculpture hidden inside the block of wood,
Yeah.
and I'm staring at a tree, baby.
You're a high school guidance counselor. You see the potential.
But I also want to say that this game was stream poison for me.
Yeah.
That people stopped tuning in at a certain point, and I can't blame
Sharky
them.
was having a bad time.
Oh no, they hated it, and they hate me for dragging them along into
yes.
it.
And I would like to apologize to Sharky.
They had nothing to work with this game.
Yeah.
So I guess I almost hesitate, but I guess not really hesitate to ask, where does it compare against Hoshiwo Mirohito?
I
think it's worse.
I
genuinely
think
think this
this-
game is worse.
I might genuinely say this game is worse than Hoshiwo Mirohito because they knew better.
Yeah.
Hoshiwo Mirohito, for as much as that game is like a barely functional spaghetti code nightmare, it is also the product of very eager developers who had no idea what the fuck they were doing working on the family computer in the 80s. And, maybe it shouldn't have been made, but you can see how a game like that comes into existence, especially during the boom era of the Famicom and fucking Dragon Quest. This game
Is short on excuses.
Which is something
And-
that the creators of this game will readily admit.
Chris, how do you
I
feel?
actually am 100% with the both of you in... Here's the thing. So when we talk about, the culture of bad games, I think that Hoshiwo Mirohito is kind of like the doyen or just a walking emblem of if you're doing a bad game club or you're doing some sort of getting into the whole Kuso game, it is a canonical text.
It is Dai Ichiban Kusoge
It is
for a reason.
It is a foundational text.
It does everything wrong correctly.
If you really want to play the worst game to ever technically be connected to Dungeons and Dragons, by all means, play Descent to Undermountain. But outside of that masochism that you out there on the internet, hey, I'm not shaming you, you don't. I mean, you could learn a lot about what not to do, as Cass has pointed out, but also,
if you want to play a weird, bad AD&D game, play Death Keep. You can legally buy Death Keep on GOG.
And it really does say something that there has been almost no attempt, other than making a Windows version of this game after the DOS version came out. There's been no attempt to bring this game to modern technology.
No.
Like, no one wants to touch this.
Even ZP and I, ironically going like, GOG, bring Descent to Undermountain to GOG. Come on, you cowards. I have to rescind that.
Nah, I'm going to keep saying it just because they should.
For preservation
if they're gonna
purposes.
Put porn on GOG, god damn it, give me a version of Descent to Undermountain.
Okay.
I'm a day one purchase on Descent to Undermountain on GOG.
I would absolutely. I'm with Cass. Like, there's already pornography on GOG, and their whole thing is that we make the weird old PC games. Bring it. You probably have to pay Jim Cummings.
GOG is also a repository for some other very infamous garbage games that aren't just shitty porn RPG Maker trash. Because you can pay actual American dollars or the currency of your choice for Master of Orion 3, which I would put on a similar level of disastrousness.
Because it's the worst UI UX system in the history of video games.
Because it is the worst UI UX I have ever seen in a video game. It triggers a primal fear in me.
Oh, you know what? One more thing I hate about Descent to Undermountain.
Sure.
The inventory in this, where you can't equip stuff to the hotbar in the order you want unless you drop items to pick them up. And you can only see 2 columns of items at a time. So by the time you've collected like a dozen different scrolls, you're scrolling through your inventory for minutes trying to find the one item you actually need.
But Cass,
fuck that shit.
Is that worse than buying the first weapon in a merchant and it actually does less damage than punching things in the face, i.e. Hoshiro Murahito?
I'm going to say yes. I think this one earns its spot. I think this might be your new 55.
I agree with both of you. I was not expecting to come here and agree on this place. I was going to think maybe it would be below Unlimited Saga. But yeah, okay, this is our new bottom. This is the new garbage. Say that again?
Sorry.
This is the new bottom of our list.
I just want to say how proud I am to occupy both the 54 and 55 spots right now, to have the to have guessed on the 2 worst games you've covered for this.
I thank you, Cass.
Hey,
I would not have wanted to cover this without
Cass,
you.
And based off of what you've willed into the ether, as the next time we invite you back, you'll probably have another slot near the bottom.
Yeah, we were talking about something before we started recording, and maybe, come
like
December.
Our bottom 5 all Cass picks? That would be...
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a really funny gimmick. It would be very funny for me to do that, to just occupy the entire bottom of someone's list. I think it'd be a great bit.
The thing we talked about could possibly be there.
I think it might.
Oh, God. But yes, congratulations to Descent to Undermountain for being the new number 55 out of 55 on Off the Deep End's game list. This is an historic occasion, and I'm happy to have witnessed it. It doesn't make me as angry as some of these other games, but it's worse.
Hooray.
And that'll be it for us today. But thank you, ZP, as always. Thank you, Cassidy, for once again agreeing to come guest on this podcast.
You're very welcome.
They can find you on the not Fifth Generation Gaming. That's the other guy who's on this podcast. They can find you at the Bad Game Hall of Fame.
Yeah, just go to badgamehalloffame.com. There's a link to the Twitch channel there.
On the Twitch at Bad Game Hall of Fame.
That works, yes.
You have a fun Discord.
Thank you kindly. We do keep it active.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to perhaps playing some more dog shit with you in the future. As for Chris and I, our next game is thankfully going to be a much better experience than this. We are continuing to play Ion Storm's Anachronauts.
The game that they followed Daikatana up with. So this is the game where they made that Daikatana and were like, well, we have to at least make one more game, right?
Tom Hall and his little team of weirdos are making a Final Fantasy.
They decided...
Ask my opinion on Daikatana.
What's your opinion on Daikatana?
Fucking love it.
I don't hate Daikatana. There are things about Daikatana I appreciate.
Great deathmatch.
With the extreme caveat of I played that game with the patch that makes your AI companions not die immediately.
Oh, I play that shit unpatched.
Oh, Jesus. All right. Well, I think that'll be it for us. But remember to be nice to people. Remember to pay your
tip your waiters.
Pay the king's tax.
No,
pay the king's tax.
Tip your waiters. Yeah.
Drink
And also, there's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game. So with that, I leave you. Bye.